Hey everybody, it's Mike Sherwood and welcome to my YouTube channel, Don't Waste Your Life, where we remind you to be present, to be happy, and to be thankful. If you're new to my channel, I ask that you subscribe below. If you're a returning member, thanks for checking us out again. With this session this week, we're going to go through my top tips on how to start a side hustle. So a lot of people reach out to me and they say, hey, you made this real estate empire. How did you do that? How'd you get started? What does that look like? How should I do that? What should I do? I mean, honestly, the side hustle is really up to you, and it's for you to kind of figure out what works for you. So that's one thing. I'll go through how I came to the conclusions that I did for the side hustle I chose. But that doesn't mean that this will necessarily be the side hustle that you will want to take upon. So during this process, I'll go through 7 tips that I hope will help you with deciding on how to start a side hustle. But then also I'll go through some use cases on how I actually applied what I'm suggesting for you to follow. So the first one is turn disadvantage into advantage. Don't have money? Then use your time in order to put sweat equity into whatever you're trying to do. Have money but don't have the time? Use your money to be able to push you forward. So the first one we'll be talking about is turning disadvantage into an advantage. This may sound a little weird because how can you use a disadvantage to be beneficial to you? I'll give you a perfect example. So when I first started real estate, I had tons of time on my hand, but I didn't have any money. So I used my time and leveraged that in order to make progress over time where I didn't have money. So I basically just worked very hard. So I think I told you, when I first started my business, I was working nights and weekends. So I was always hustling, always bustling to be able to move. That's a huge advantage to be able to do that. Now that I'm in a different phase of my life, I don't have as much time. So I probably use a trade-off to have more money to make myself more effective. So really what it is taking and understanding what your disadvantage is and turning it into an advantage to a strength. So for example, if you're constantly doing something, you keep failing, you're like, hey, this is frustrating. Why do I keep failing? Then all you gotta do is just use that iterative process to find a way to continue to make strides or be successful. So by the very act of you going through that process, you're actually learning. And so while it may be a disadvantage that you're actually losing and you're failing, but the thing is by you. So number 2, find somebody who's further along in the process of what you're trying to do for your side hustle than you are. They don't have to be an expert in the particular area. They just need to be further than where you are. So that way they could teach you the missteps that you may be going into and prevent you from making those same mistakes that they did. The idea is to leverage their learnings. So what I recommend, and I saw people do all the time, and what I did when I first started this, is I would invite them out for coffee and I just want to pick their brains. I would, make sure that the time made sense to them. I'd buy them coffee or buy them lunch because they are helping me. And so what I always recommend to people is that if you find a good mentor or somebody who's trying to teach you or coach you this stuff, also find out what you can do to help them. And I promise you, if you keep this in mind, that person, when you text them or you call them, they will always pick up the phone because they know that the time that they're investing in you to make you better is actually helpful and beneficial to them, and you're actually taking real action. I think it's very important. So like in real estate, when I first started, I learned from bigger pockets. I interviewed other people who had done what I wanted to be able to do, which was to acquire real estate. So actually what I ended up doing is we ended up creating our own real estate investment meetup where I got to meet other investors way more successful than me. Even though I ran the meetings, it was a platform for other people to learn and to come together. So I benefited from that, and many other people benefit from that as well. So number 3, understand what your goal is and be realistic. So when you're starting this side hustle, you need to figure out what is the end game of this. What do you want to become? Do you want to become your full-time job? Do you want it to just be able to make enough money to pay for your kids' college or for a particular thing that you're trying to do? You need to understand what it is and be realistic. You're not going to be able to go out there and quickly acquire skills and be able to operate at as high a level as somebody who's professionally done it immediately out of the gate. You're going to have to be realistic about what's actually achievable in the time frame that you're willing to devote to it. Hard work is required. You can't just automatically get something and have it happen. You got to work at it. So for me, the example I give is when I first started, I bought my duplex. And when I bought that duplex, I shared a room in that duplex. So in my apartment that I lived in, I rented that out. I also rented out the upstairs. I lived very frugally. I lived very basically. My goal was to find a way to buy a single property every year before I was 30. I wanted to buy 5 properties before I was 30. That was my goal. And so I had to be realistic about that. And I couldn't say, hey, I want to buy 15 places. That was going to be very hard with the amount of cash that I had and what I was trying to achieve. So really, looking back on that, I was able to achieve that goal, but really I was able to achieve that goal because it was realistic. I didn't set such a high bar that I wasn't going to be able to achieve it. So it's never too late to start. You can start at any time. The best time to start was yesterday. The second best time to start is today. So regardless of where you're at, I don't want to hear the excuse was, oh, I started too late, or that's not really possible, or the market's not going to work. I get it. I've heard that many, many times, and those are just excuses. There's always opportunities in the market. You just need to find what that is for the side hustle that you want to do. Obviously, there are going to be some that are going to be more lucrative than others, and there are going to be strategies that are going to work at sometimes versus others. So for example, the strategy that I used, if I tried to do it now, I would not be able to do it as well as what I did during the market downturn. So you really got to understand that there is an element of timing, but at the same time, you need to also understand that you can do different strategies at different times. So like right now, a buy and hold may not make sense. But if I was investing in this real estate market, I'd probably buy, fix the places up, and then quickly sell them because the market's just continuing to go up and up. So you need to understand your markets and be able to figure out what's going to work for you. And this is not just for real estate, it's just everything in general. So again, timing is very important. And so obviously I wouldn't be able to do the same strategies I was able to do now that I was, in the past. So number 5 is don't be afraid of making mistakes. You got to take those and learn and move on. So I'll give you a real example. When I first started doing real estate, I actually bought a duplex. And when I bought the duplex, on the contract, it stated that, they renegotiated back and said, hey, we're going to give you the supplies to fix the roof. There was a hole in the roof. And I just gullibly just took it and said, yes, I'll take the money. Basically I ended up having to pay more than what I had to do if I just said, I don't want the materials. So the problem was I went to go look at the materials in the garage, and sure enough, found out that they were just old, crappy pieces of wood. So the guy was actually planning to put up those old pieces of wood. That cost me $4,000. So that's what I'm saying. Like after that lesson that I learned, I knew that I couldn't do that again. I had to, be more thoughtful on and inspecting things when it comes to the contract and be able to know that, hey, there are people out there trying to get you, or they're just trying to pass it on. So you just need to be mindful of that. And that was just me being naive. It was my first deal. So that deal or that particular mistake cost me $4,000. But now, many years later, in the COVID kind of time frame, and my partner and I were looking at a fourplex. So it was 4 units, and it made sense. It was about $75,000 or $79,000 on paper for the list price. And, the financials, everything made sense. And then I started talking to them. We went in at a low bid. I want to say we went in the 40s, because we also felt that given everything that was happening in New York with COVID, that could be potentially that some tenants are not paying. There's a lot of that was going on. So the funny thing about it was they accepted the offer. We're like, wow, very surprised. So maybe we could have got it even cheaper. So then we started doing our due diligence. So remember back to what I was talking about, where in the contract stage for my first deal, I just kind of took it at face value and just went with it. This one, I actually investigated. I looked at it further and found out that when looking at the financials, and I asked for the actual bank statements, because I've had another instance where somebody told me, yeah, here's the financials. And I didn't verify the bank statements. And they were trying to trip us up on that. That's what I'm saying. You got to look into that. So when I did that, sure enough, found out that 3 out of the 4 tenants were just not paying. So these guys were just trying to unload it. I looked up, they had a mortgage, so they were just bleeding money every month, and they couldn't evict the tenants because in New York State, because of the eviction moratorium, they could not evict, so they were just bleeding money. We went back and told them, hey, our offer no longer is this, it's this. And it was much less, and they said, thank you, but we found somebody else. And while I'm sad that we didn't get that, I'm also happy that we didn't overpay, because we would have had to bleed out money for at least another year, because this was probably about a year ago. And just now we're getting to the point where we can evict tenants. So that's what I'm saying. It's being okay with that and understanding that and learning from those mistakes, because in the future, those mistakes that you made in the past could prevent you from making even bigger mistakes in the future. So always keep that in mind and be okay with it. I mean, $4,000 at the time when I didn't have that much money, that was a lot. That definitely, I overpaid, but in the grand scheme of things, it was okay. So number 6, don't be afraid to spend money to speed up the process. Now I understand, depending upon where you're starting, you may not be able to spend money because you're like, hey, I need this side hustle to make extra money. But sometimes understanding where you can leverage your money to be able to make it so you can get up your learning curve faster is the best way to move forward. And now I'm not trying to say you should go and take those, guru courses to be able to move you forward, but the idea is that you need to understand, is there a way to educate yourself? Is there a way to hire people to help you? So for example, when my partner and I were doing real estate, we quickly realized that we were not going to be able to do all the work ourselves. We had to hire people. We had to hire handymen or handywomen to take care of stuff. We also needed to hire a property management company. So we ended up building all this because we knew we were going to need that in order to be successful. So that was really the only way we could do it. And it was difficult at first, but then we eventually were able to use that to move ourselves forward. So the other thing to add here is, like, if you have to outsource, if there's a particular area where you're not good at, you may have to outsource that to somebody else. And while you may look at that and say, hey, that's costing me money, but like, let's say you don't have the time. Like for me, for example, now I'm very busy. I can't do all that stuff. So there's other people that have to step in and I have to pay somebody to do that. And the thing is that allows me to leverage their time, allows me to leverage my time to be successful. And you have to do that. That's just part of how the economics work. And again, if you can't afford it, then in the beginning, you really have to do all the work yourself. So in the last one, number 7, don't compare yourself to other people. Compare yourself to yourself. The reason why I say this is everybody's situation is different. Everybody has different advantages and disadvantages. And so what you need to understand is that your unique situation is unique to you. So if you try to say, hey, well, so-and-so had X number of properties, at this time, and I'm way behind them, or they had X number of subscribers, I'm not doing well. Again, your situation is different. Everybody's different. So you need to understand, compare yourself to yourself on where you want to go and what you want to achieve. That's the only way you can do that. So for example, for me, when I was doing real estate, I told you I wanted to do five deals by the time I was 30. But then after that, other people I knew were growing much faster. And I was like, how is this fair? I don't have any more money, or I just don't have the time. And especially now with being so busy with being a father, being a husband, and being a full-time worker and doing this and do other stuff, I just don't have the time to be able to do that. But I got to be okay with the idea that I'm giving that up for this other stuff and being okay with that, because if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, you're just never going to be happy. You're always going to be like, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? And the thing is the crazy part about it is just because they have that doesn't mean they're happy. Oftentimes, it means that they actually covet even more. Because that's the thing with this, is it just oftentimes you gotta remind yourself to be happy with what you have. So that's it. So if you guys have any thoughts and you want to share what your side hustle is that you're trying to do, or if a particular tip that I talked about was helpful for you, or there's something I missed out, please comment, share, reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, guys.